US operator Gate Renewables is clear that it intends to help lead the overall decarbonization of the United States electricity sector. The operational fleet includes over 100 solar facilities across 31 US states, with 2 gigawatts installed and over 30 gigawatts in development. I sat down with CEO Ben Catt here in Dubai to talk about a company that provides and thrives on energy. Ben, there's no doubt in it that COP28 is the biggest gathering of its kind so far to date. Lots of people you could benefit from running into, I guess.
Absolutely, and I think with an event like this, what's so interesting about it is the entire effort's such a multi-stakeholder process. So this is an opportunity for all the stakeholders to get together and ultimately be able to share ideas and find solutions to what are incredibly complex problems.
Of which there are many, and there's all sorts of different specialists around to look at that.
It is, and being able to kind of have that kind of sharing of subject matter expertise, I think, is really critical, because the intersection of all those stakeholders is really where you find the solutions. And so for me, an event like this is really interesting because you're able to get those perspectives, which are really helpful.
Absolutely. Why don't we take this to the studio, talk in more detail?
All right, sounds good.
Ben, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew.
First of all, fill us in. Tell us about Gate. We know it's in the solar business, but give us an idea of the scale you currently operate on.
Definitely. So Gate we are a national renewable energy IPP. So that means that we specialize in solar and energy storage. We started out as a small regional company, focusing primarily in the Southeast. We now have active projects across 30 different states and a development pipeline that's about a little over 30 gigawatts at this point.
And I would imagine you're a disciple. I mean, presumably you feel that this is absolutely the way forward in terms of the world's energy needs.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've really leaned into at Gate is looking at how we can take scalable technologies, solar and energy storage, and be able to really deploy them across the entire country. And really even focusing on saying, when we look at those technologies, we know that they can scale, we know they're reliable, we know that they're proven technologies, but it's looking at how we actually work inside the commercial models and all the places that we work to be able to get more renewable energy on the grid, to get more carbon-free electrons to the grid, which is really the mission of what we're doing.
So much of the energy story is about innovation and thinking outside of the box. First of all, before we look at a gathering like this one, tell us a bit about the ethos at Gate.
Well, so the way we look at it is that we have always been, even from kind of a small, scrappy startup company, we've always had this mentality of continuing to find innovative solutions. And while innovative a lot of times applies to, or people think about technology, there's also innovative commercial models. There are ways that we can implement renewable energy at scale, because that really is what drives it at the end of the day, is finding scalable commercial solutions, because that really is the key to continuing to see this explosive growth that we need for the energy transition, because we're still in the early innings of this. And so frankly, being able to be innovative, not just in the technology we're using, but ultimately innovative in how we are deploying and commercializing that technology is a critical piece of how we build Gate.
And do you think part of that culture is moving away from the idea of monopolies, behemoth companies that run everything, to going local, if you like, and being part of a widespread theme of expertise across your space?
One of the things that at Gate that we've really embraced is that this initiative, kind of the energy transition, needs players like Gate, because we're going to push the boundaries of what we think is possible. We're going to be able to push the boundaries of not only kind of where we are, but what we're doing, so that we can continue to drive that, because that drives that catalyst. That's that kind of incentive, that spark that's going to really transform what we need to do, because the scale of what we're all trying to tackle is so massive that we need players like Gate who are willing to come in and innovate to be able to drive it forward.
So you're a US company, so you're used to dealing with the US government in terms of planning and legislation and permits and all the rest of it, and dovetailing a bit, I would guess, with local government and municipal management and all the rest of it. Yeah. So if we transfer that thought to a gathering like this, where you've got governmental delegations trying to puzzle out how they're going to agree certain terms of proceeding, with the private sector getting more and more interested, bringing their ideas and their expertise, can you see a relationship between those two scenarios?
Absolutely. And I think that's what's interesting about a gathering like this, is that there aren't a ton of opportunities for this broad of kind of a spectrum of stakeholders inside of this process to get together. And I'm a firm believer that when you look at the public and private sector, The public sector does essentially kind of sets the table for what kind of the initiative is going to look like. The private sector is where it executes. The private sector is the one that actually comes in and builds those commercial models to really scale, technologies, to scale, business models, to scale everything else that we need for a massive energy transition. And so really those two things working hand in glove to where you have, policymakers, legislators, people coming together and thinking, how do we make good policy that then incentivizes the private sector to be able to really take that and fuel that explosive growth that we need? That's a really critical part of this entire process.
So here's a more international question, which might be a bit unfair, but the Global South, for example, always complains that they're left out of that metric,
Sure.
that they watch the bigger economies piecing things together by themselves, but they always feel, in a way, redundant or left behind, relying on aid models that are outdated
Right.
and all the rest of it. How can we scale it up so that there's a bigger inclusion program? I mean, here is an attempt to do that, but can you see a way where perhaps you might be involved in the future with other international companies outside the United States, for example?
The way, that renewables and carbon-free kind of energy is going to come onto the grid, there's a pattern recognition that comes with it that I think there's a lot of lessons learned that can ultimately be shared across multiple geographies. And we even see this inside of the US, but we're going to see it globally as well, because this is a complex process. And being able to really lean on subject matter experts who have seen this transition in other areas so that we can be more efficient with it in kind of other geographies is critical. And I think that that's why gathering like this is so great, is you can have folks who are looking at this and saying, here's what's policy that's been effective and here's policy that's not effective. Here are commercial models that we think are scalable. Here are commercial models that are challenged. And you're able to really be able to get that broader stakeholder process so that you're able to really have a global effort and be able to really tap into those lessons, those mistakes that have happened along the way so that we can continue to drive it forward. Because, like you said, it's a global issue that we're trying to solve. It's just going to happen on a very nuanced way in a lot of different regions.
Okay, let's roll back a bit, go back to the technology. How good is solar?
Solar is incredibly reliable, and really when you think back to it, the first kind of modern commercial solar installation happened almost 40 years ago, and it's still operational today. And so solar is in a lot of ways going to be the workhorse of the energy transition, or at least one of the workhorses of the energy transition, because we can scale it, you can put it almost anywhere, and frankly, we know it's reliable and it's something that continue to kind of replace thermal generation, which is a critical piece of the entire energy transition. Obviously, there are going to be other technologies that are going to contribute, and that's going to be incredibly important as we continue to have this multi-stakeholder process. But really, solar is going to be one of those kind of the backbone of a lot of that energy transition because it's proven, it's reliable, and ultimately we know we can scale.
We know how to get that power down into the photovoltaic cells,
Sure.
or whatever. It's having it ready and keeping it stored and being able to deploy it.
Absolutely.
That is where we're looking for the modernization. Is that right?
We have to acknowledge, while solar is reliable, it's proven, it's scalable, it's also intermittent. And that is something that those are really kind of the challenges, or one of the main challenges that we're facing as solar penetration becomes more and more of the grid. And that's something that we have to be incredibly thoughtful from a planning perspective to do. It's one of the reasons that we lean heavily into energy storage development as part of our solar portfolio as well. We do both standalone energy storage and hybrid, so solar and energy storage paired together. And really being able to continue to see that industry grow, because that stationary energy storage is still very much in the early kind of evolution of what that's going to look like. And so while a lot of the technologies we see deployed right now are generally lithium ion when it comes to anything that's kind of at significant scale, we're going to see alternate technologies continue to be a bigger and bigger part of the mix, because we're going to need long duration storage. We're going to need other options that are out there as renewables become more a part of the grid. And so that's a critical component, because to your point, we need energy when we need energy. And so having, the ability to be creative in how we're utilizing those technologies that pair with kind of proven renewable energy, carbon-free resources is a critical part of the entire equation.
Final thought then, I can get a vision of your plan, 31 states already in the US. Personally, what's your investment in this whole process?
I mean, I think for me, this is when we look at across this is a multi-decade process. This is something that is going to be, even when we get to the very ambitious targets that everyone is talking about here at COP28, there is so much beyond that. And so being able to build a commercial model that has a foundation that's sustainable, that can continue to really have an impact in the power sector, but ultimately the broader spectrum of the energy sector as a whole, is a critical piece. So Pine Gate's going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to expand, but we're going to do it in a way where we continue to build that foundation to make a company that is going to be able to have an impact for decades to come.
Ben Catt, pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks so much.